Hi, everybody, and welcome to the December 2023 Religions United panel. Tonight, we're talking about diverse holiday celebrations. But first, a little bit about who we are. We're the Religions United panel of the Oklahoma Faith Network, which is an organization committed to building interfaith understanding here in the Oklahoma City metro and wider Oklahoma state. And my name is Tim Atkins. I serve as the religious educator at the First Unitarian Church in downtown Oklahoma City. I'm a member of the Religions United panel. I'm also on the board of the Oklahoma Faith Network. So thank you for joining us, those who are watching live or for those who are watching later. This should be a good, fun, interesting panel for you today. So today we're talking about different holidays, the holidays that maybe are outside the mainstream. You know, the hipster holidays, the holidays from that you may not quite have maybe heard of before, but don't really know too much about. And so tonight we're just going to learn a little bit more about them all together. So I'm going to introduce all of our panelists first, and then we'll hear from each of our panelists individually. But joining us tonight, we have Rabbi Juan Mejia from the Emmanuel Synagogue, who's their education director. We have Deborah Bonita from the Oklahoma Muslim Prison Support and HGFI. We have Anil Kathari, who's an educator in the Hindu community of Oklahoma. And we have Dr. R.C. Davis Undiano, who is the director of World Literature Today and Latinx Studies at OU. So thank you all for joining us. Such a wonderful, esteemed panel. So let's start with Rabbi Juan Mejia from Emmanuel Synagogue. So what is a holiday from your culture or faith tradition that you find particularly meaningful to celebrate?
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you to OFN. And I will start with the last thing you asked me to. I'm going to flip it around, which is to clarify a misunderstanding. And everybody thinks that the Jewish Christmas is Hanukkah because they line up around the winter time. But there's very different, Hanukkah and Christmas have very different meanings. If anything, the Jewish Christmas, the Jewish equivalent to Christmas, is my favorite holiday, which is Sukkot. Now, Sukkot in Hebrew means booths, and it is the last of the agricultural feasts of the Jewish calendar. You have three holidays that, although they are anchored in parts of the Bible and Jewish history, they also have a very deep agricultural component of the rhythms of the land of the Middle East and the Levant. The first one is Passover, which is in the spring. Then for the early grain harvest, you have the Feast of Weeks. But then at the end, when you're done with your work, when you have the fruit harvest, when you have your wine and your oil, that is when you do Sukkot. And Sukkot is a booth. Why? Because in this harvest, you're sleeping outside. Right? You're sleeping, you have to be close to your trees. You're working usually before the sun is up. So you're getting used to having this outside experience. And then in scripture, it gets codified that on the full moon of the first month of the fall, after the harvest, you have a holiday, which is usually just simply called Hag, or Hajj, and in Arabic is Hajj, just the holiday. And why is it called the holiday? Because back in the day, there was nothing compared to it. Like, you know that you're going to have enough food for winter. Things got very, very, it's a very extravagant holiday in terms of decorations. And this is one of the reasons why it feels very Christmassy, in the sense that one of the ways this holiday is celebrated today is that people build booths outside their homes, outside their synagogues, and you're having something with green, and just having greenery beckons to put lights on it, particularly night. And many American Jews say, you know what, we want to bring this light into our sukkah. And when you have this space, which in Oklahoma, it's beautiful because it's like the only week of fall that we actually have. Before it gets too cold, but before it's that sweet spot. It's always around Sukkot, and you eat outside, and you have this combination of entering the season by putting yourself around like vegetation, living outside in nature. And there is a daily ritual in which is also commanded in the Torah, of taking diverse plants, palm tree, myrtle, willow, and the fruit, a citron, or a beautiful looking fruit, and you wave them around. And this is extremely ancient fertility rituals that eventually got streamlined into Judaism. But until today, we have this custom of bringing these beautiful vegetable offerings, and you wave them and you dance with them, and like celebrating we had a good harvest and we're ready for winter. So it does have that smell of greenery and shrubbery, and I think this spirit of it's going to be fine, we'll live through winter, that Christmas has. So it is my favorite holiday, certainly since moving to Oklahoma. My wife, Abby Jacobson, the rabbi of Emmanuel Synagogue, and I lived in New York for a long time. And it's hard to build a hut in New York. Like, people come and they take it down. But since now we are in Oklahoma and people have driveways and backyards, it's wonderful to have this, and particularly the week that Oklahoma weather behaves. And it's wonderful. And if you see around October, September, around your Jewish neighbors, a little booth, come in. It's a holiday of hospitality. In Jewish folklore, this holiday was seen as the harbinger of rain for the season. Jews are praying for rain, but we're praying for rain for everybody. We're praying for a rainy season for everybody. So it does have also this very ecumenical, very open, like, come to the sukkah. We're now putting ourselves in the hands of the Creator as the weather gets cold. We're going out to the fields to meet the season with optimism and with joy. It is called the time of our joy. So that is my favorite holiday, Sukkot, around the beginning of the fall, but definitely carries a lot of this strength.
When you said living in New York, not being able to put up a Sukkot booth, made me smile. The first Unitarian church I served was in northern New Jersey, in the New York City metro area. And about a third of that congregation had Jewish heritage. And so it was my first time ever working for a church. In my first year, they built a Sukkot hut and
Isn't it fun?
A lesson. It was fun. It was neat.
Oh, and if you have the spine for it, the kids love to sleep on it. As you get older, the prospect of sleeping in it gets a little bit daunting, but
yes, like lock-ins at a church. So thank you, Juan. Deeply appreciate it. We might come back if we have more questions that come up in our chat. But for now, let's move to Deborah Bonita from the Oklahoma Muslim Prison Support and HGFI. What is a holiday from your culture or faith tradition that you find particularly meaningful to celebrate?
So the big one that most people know about is Ramadan. And really, outside of cultural celebrations, Muslims celebrate only 3 holidays. And so the major one is Ramadan. It doesn't have a set particular date. It's the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, and it's based on 12 months lunar calendar, which is like 11 days shorter than the solar calendar. So it moves 11 days. Ramadan moves from day to day. And so it is a 30-day fast. And so one of the misconceptions, since we're talking about misconceptions, we do not fast for the whole 30 days. We fast within the 30 days. So for 30 days, we fast from dawn, so sun up, to sundown is when we break our fast. And most people want to know, do we drink water? Nope, not even water. And so it is a celebration of, or a time of self-reflection. It is a time to honor and worship God and spend time with with yourself in the presence and the spirit of God. But I think, usually we hear the Muslims talk about this, but I'm going to take just a different kind of spin for this. As a convert revert, somebody that was not born into Islam, one of the things that I always like to take great care for is people that have come into the faith. So, as myself, came from a Christian family, and there were lots of celebrations, Christmas time around this time. And so, sometimes it's a little bit emotional for people that have come to this faith because we don't celebrate, Christmas. We don't decorate. We don't celebrate Christmas. And so the Christmas parties with the family that, you don't go to, or you don't do this and you don't do this. And sometimes that leaves a void. And so I am a mental health first aid trainer. So, we always look at those mental health things, right? And so it is sometimes I find for converts, reverts, it is different for them in this time because, we're not going to celebrate Kwanzaa. We're not celebrating Christmas. We're not, doing all of these other things. And so what do we do in this time? And how do you spend that time with your family, but, not fall in those pitfalls? And so, it's an interesting time for people that have converted to this faith. But I just tell them to hold on. And so we'll celebrate Ramadan in March of this year. And then after that comes Eid al-Fitr, which is basically just the celebration of breaking fast. So it's it's right after Ramadan, the next day after Ramadan, and we celebrate when we've broken our fast. We've had our community prayer. Everyone is dressed in their fanciest, as my grandfather used to say, your Sunday go to meeting clothes. Except we do it on Friday or the last day of Ramadan. And so we're celebrating, and it's usually a 3-day festival. And this time there are some great minds in our community that got everyone together, because usually you pray and then everybody kind of goes, their own way, their own little community groups, cultural groups, whatever, everybody just disperses. But this year, we were really blessed with a big festival that everyone was a part of. And I pray they do it again this year because I missed it, but I heard great things. And then our next is Eid al-Adha, which is it's the end of our calendar, and it is a festival of sacrifice. And so those are really the only 3 holidays that Muslims generally celebrate. Nobody come for me if you have a cultural celebration that you do. But those are great. And I love, the Ramadan. You see people that maybe you haven't seen before. We are able to break fast at the mosque together. We're able to pray together. Family that prays together stays together, they say. And so really getting to see it. And then I find that the last day of Ramadan, when we are doing our prayers all together as a community, is like so diverse and so beautiful, from the whitest of ivory skin to the darkest of black skin, and just this whole array, in the middle is such beautiful, and everybody's speaking in the same language, the same words, just praising God. To me, just really makes my heart melt. And that is my favorite.
Well, thank you. That was lovely. Thank you, Deborah. So, Anil, what would be a holiday from your culture / faith tradition that you find particularly meaningful to celebrate?
Yeah, so in the Hindu faith, they say that every day is kind of a celebration because there's some festival or something going on. Because it's just a faith that celebrates a lot of rituals, and there are different days have different significances. And so like the full moon has its significance, the new moon has its significance, and so on. And so every day is a celebration. But when we talk about something that's a particular or special holiday, what I particularly look at is both the feelings and emotions it generates, as well as the message it gives. And to me, Diwali, which comes around this time of the year, around fall, is the special festival because it combines, it generates the emotions of celebrating the bounty of life and of sharing with others, and also brings deep scientific and scientific messages and learnings as well. So the way we celebrate Diwali, so Diwali is the festival of lights, and it's celebrated in 140 countries wherever Hindus exist. But it's not just Hindus; it's also a very important festival for Jains and Sikhs, with different meanings. But they also celebrate it as the festival of light, or lights. And the way we celebrate it is by the celebrations start with deep cleaning of the house, and that has its own scientific value. But the message it gives is it purifies. When you start by purifying your atmosphere, your environment, it starts slowly. You start the process of purification of your internal systems as well. And so you start by deep cleaning the house, you're deep cleaning your environment, your backyard, your front yard, and then you move on to preparing sweets, and all the goodies that you want to distribute. The purpose of preparing in a big scale, at every home you see these smells of frying food, and desserts cooking and things like that. And they're made in big scale because the intent is to share not just with family or extended family, but also with your neighbors. And then you have this decoration of the houses. So just before the start of the Diwali festival, we light up lamps. So Diwali literally means a row of lamps. And then we also we have these lamps called oil lamps, because they have an oil and a wick. And the significance of that is basically purification of the air. In many cultures around the world, fire is considered as sacred because it purifies the air, it generates positive vibes, it generates warmth and heat, and so it kind of evokes those emotions of warmth and togetherness. And so lighting those oil and wick lamps actually gives that message of warm togetherness, but also purification of the atmosphere. So we decorate that. And then we also have rangoli, which is basically a design that's made in front of the house, sometimes using rice flour and different colors. So different dyes are mixed into the rice flour, and then just an array of different colors or a row of different colors is made. And that has its significance too. The reason why the rice flour is used is so that we can also feed the little creatures and critters that are around. So you don't do that inside the house, you do it right outside in the front yard, outside the house. And so you think about the smallest of the creatures and feeding them and making sure that they're also well fed. And so you decorate the house with lights and these colors, and then sometimes rangolis are also made with flowers. And then the final thing is actually on the day of the celebration is basically just coming together as a family, getting up early and taking a shower. In some places, or in some, one of the rituals is also having like an oil massage early morning before sunrise and taking a shower. So you clean your body, you basically use that to moisturize your body, and then you kind of cleanse it properly, and then the whole family does that, and then we come together, we visit the temple, or we visit, and then we visit friends, and we distribute sweets, and then in the evening there's a lot of fireworks, and sometimes you share the fireworks with your neighbors and other children and things like that. So it's just celebrating the bounty that we do. And so really the origins of Diwali have many stories, and the reason why the Hindu faith has so many stories about different gods and different figures and different characters is because they give us messages through the nuances of how life is lived or how life should be lived. and how we should care for each other and what we should do for each other, and how we celebrate our heroes, how we also consider our, our environment, and so on. So it just, those different stories give different nuances of life, and so they bring different messages, and they generally bring a lot of cheer. And so Diwali is the festival that's my most favorite. But like I said, every day, if you think, is a different festival, and so it's just celebrating life all around.
All right, thank you, Anil. All right, so let's move to Dr. R.C. Davis Undiano, who's a professor of Latinx Studies at OU. What is a holiday from your culture / faith tradition that you find particularly meaningful? And you are still on mute, just to let you know. So I'm going to stall for just a minute because I'm sure you didn't start yet. There we go. Okay. Hello.
Yeah, I'm glad to talk about this. I actually thought I was going to talk about Mexican Christmas practices tonight, but I'm always happy to talk about Day of the Dead. First, let me give you some facts about Day of the Dead, things that actually happen on the 1st and 2nd of November. There are things that happen in the home, domestic observances of the Day of the Dead, and there are things that happen in public life, out in parks and in the centers of towns all over Mexico. What happens in the home is that people create an altar in their home that recognizes the dead. It's called an ofrenda, an offering. And usually it's a table pushed up against the wall, or if you have nichos, in this house, we have nichos, cut out spaces in the walls. You put pictures of the dead, some of their maybe favorite artifacts, Christian icons, crosses, pictures of the Virgin of Guadalupe. And there's not a specific ritual that goes with setting up that altar, that ofrenda in the house. Rather, it creates a reference point. And the belief is that between the 1st and the 2nd of November, a moment comes where a window opens up and the dead are able to come back into this world and connect with us. And so the idea is that we set up a kind of welcoming atmosphere where we are already mindful of the dead that still live with us through memory. They're there all the time, but we're mindful because we have pictures of them in the altar. We have, various religious icons, etc. And there'll probably be chrysanthemums somewhere in the house. Chrysanthemums have a very strong aroma, and the belief is that will guide the dead back to where we are because they'll smell that and be led by it. In the home, very often people create some dish for dinner that's a favorite of the person who died, and they'll put that on the table with the idea that that's going to draw them back again. And then there are a whole assortment of little sugar figures, a calavera, which is like a little skull made out of sugar, or there can be various sugar toys, like little coffins made out of sugar where the lid actually opens and closes, and various things that represent the experience of death cast in sugar. If you move outside the home, particularly in larger cities in Mexico, people are going to graveyards and maybe they're consuming food near the grave of the person they're commemorating. In parks, people set up scenes, escenas in Spanish, where full body skeletons are doing something that they would do in their normal life. Maybe it's a carpenter shop and they're cutting wood and hammering things, whatever. Or it could be a scene where several people are drinking tea together. There's a standard figure called La Catrina, who is a woman with a broad-brimmed hat, and she's just a skeleton, and she's always socializing with other people and basically ignoring the fact that she's dead. And she's sort of caught in mid-act. serving tea to somebody or working in a carpenter shop or something. And these asenas are reminders that just as the people in the scene, the skeletons in the scene, don't realize they're dead, we're living and may not realize that death is imminent for us and that it's a part of our life all the time, because the dearly beloved really never disappear for us. They're always there in memory. And so the cleaning off of burial sites in cemeteries, having the food there, and then recognizing the asenas are all rituals that happen every year. And I want to think about all of this, are presented as on three levels. On one level, the Day of the Dead has become a little bit like Halloween, and it's confused with Halloween a lot because Halloween happens just a day before All Saints Day and All Souls Day. And at one level, it is just a recognition of grotesquerie. There's a kind of trauma because it's a reminder of death, and with the influence of Halloween, Day of the Dead is a little more like Halloween than it used to be in the past. At another level, the Day of the Dead creates a perspective. Now, there was something I meant to bring if I were talking about Day of the Dead, but I didn't think I was. In my office at OU, I've got a piece of sculpture that's probably about this big, maybe like 1.5 feet high. And it's a representation of Coatlicue. And Coatlicue is the Aztec goddess of life and death. And if she were here, it's a kind of horrific, scary figure. She's got rows of human hearts. She's got rows of breasts, so that somebody could be nurtured by her. And in the place of a head, there are two snake heads that are curled, and they're meeting together, life and death. She's fundamentally a representation of life and death. There's nothing like this in Western culture. This is absolutely outside of the realm of Western culture. So, so she nourishes the world with rows of hearts. There are hands, there are skulls. She's a very complex figure. And the message of Coatlicue is that life and death have to be understood in relation to each other. The sort of cheery attitude about death just being something that we deal with when we have to in the United States and a lot of Western culture is not the view of Coatlicue. Her view is that we can't conceive of life without conceiving of death. And when we see them in the full expression, sort of married to each other, and, one always evoking the other, the belief in the Aztec world and the belief in the Mexican-American world is that there's more of a balance in our lives. There's more of a kind of healthy embrace and recognition that there is a life cycle that is constantly turning over, flicking from life to death, and we live closer to the reality of our lives if we can live with that, seeing those kind of polar opposites brought together, where they're not polar opposites, but they're just different facets of the life that we actually live. And I would say that the ofrenda, the offering, the scenes in parks where people are, doing kinds of skeletons are doing weird things and not realizing that they're dead, all of that moves in that same direction, to see the healthy relationship of life and death, and not just life split off in some kind of cheerful way away from death. So that's the second level. First level is something like Halloween. The second level is this actual perspective of the way that life and death relate to each other in a dynamic relationship. But there's a third historical level that I want to talk about. And then the piece that Kat Romero read that I wrote for the Humanities magazine touches on this pretty strongly. When the Spanish came to America in the 16th century, there were 25 million indigenous people. We know that pretty reliably now. This has been researched a lot. Barely 60 years later, there were fewer than 1 million indigenous people in the New World. Just let your mind wrap around that. It's 5 times the number of the Holocaust of World War II. Almost 25 million people died in a very short period of time. And the way they died was, many of them from disease and that the Spanish brought over and maltreatment and so on. But the Spanish were also very serious about sugar as a commodity crop. And sugar became part of the diet in the New World, where we are, maybe 100, 150 years before it became part of the diet in Western Europe. And sugar is a very difficult crop to bring to market. So the Spanish enslaved indigenous people and literally worked them to death. I mean, this is a terrible part of the history in this hemisphere that we don't talk about very much. I think people try to avoid it because there's a sense of the New World being a cheery place, a place where we've taken a new step to a different part of what makes us human. But the Holocaust of the New World was just enormous. And so if you were an Aztec person at that time, enslaved by the Spanish, and you wanted to make reminders of death, very often you would make them out of sugar. See, I always thought, before I understood this years ago, the sugar figures in Day of the Dead, I thought, were part of making it a little more cheery for children and taking what's solemn and making it a little more fun. The Aztecs would have been aware that if they think about death, it's probably going to be associated with sugar, because there's a good chance that you will die being worked to death in trying to bring sugar to market. In the Caribbean, the Spanish succeeded so well in killing everybody, there was nobody left. They had to bring new people in to work the fields, and that's where the importation of people from Africa happened. The killing of indigenous people was so pervasive and so successful that the crown in Spain brought people back over and charged them with crimes against humanity. And it said, keep your hands off indigenous people. You've killed just about everybody. Don't do it anymore. And that's when, as I said, black people were brought in to work the fields. So there's really an ugly history here that we don't deal with very much. And but it's one of those things where the evidence of it is hidden in plain sight. The calaveras, little sugar skulls where children write their names on the forehead. And that's one of the practices. They do this in school, having these sugar figures all over the place. It is our history in plain sight, because sugar equals death in a way that is not intuitive at all, but is part of the history of the Americas. So that's the third level, where our history in the Americas, in this hemisphere, is being recognized. The Holocaust that happened here, along with this different perspective on life and death, and along with the sort of display of grotesquerie that's closer to Halloween. And so when I see sugar figures that are such a big part of All Saints Day, the 1st of November, which commemorates the death of innocent children who died in childbirth or whatever, and then All Souls Day, which is more having to do with the death of adults, that when I see sugar figurines and toys, it's also a retelling of the history of the Americas that we haven't faced yet. And I really worry that this may never come. We may never come clean about what happened in the European settlement of the Americas, and that history that it's not disputed. Everybody knows what happened to indigenous people in this hemisphere. It's very seldom talked about. And in the book, the last book that I wrote, Mestizos Come Home, Making and Claiming Mexican American Identity, I called out the historians that will deal with this disturbing history of our hemisphere, and it's not very many. So when people tell the history of the hemisphere, very often they'll go back to before contact and then after the Holocaust of the Americas has already happened, and they just skip over that troubling phase where 25 million indigenous people died. So the Days of the Dead tell history, they create a tone, they create a perspective, and I think it's actually fitting that the Days of the Dead come right before the Christmas season, the 1st and 2nd of November, and a reminder of the world that we live in, that Christmas may obscure just a little bit, this history and this perspective on the way life and death relate to each other. So Days of the Dead are very important in the Hispanic world, Mexican American world. My father was from Mexico, so these are days that are absolutely sacred for me. And in Mexico, all of the things that I mentioned happen. The celebration of the Days of the Dead with the ofrenda and so on and so forth, but it's a little more religiously framed in Mexico. It's become a time in America where we put pictures of politicians on the ofrenda and connect with popular culture in a lot of ways that doesn't always happen in Mexico. So Days of the Dead are a real window into indigenous culture in the Americas, and a reminder of the history that we haven't really embraced yet.
So, speaking of Day of the Dead, something that we are mindful of in my Unitarian tradition is being very mindful about cultural appropriation, and that if it's a holiday, it is not our holiday to tinker with. So some folks, that becomes a barrier to some folks to fully participating and to folks who are wanting to learn more. So a question, and I'll start with you, Professor, and then we'll go around to everybody, is if someone from outside that culture or faith tradition finds inspiration in your holiday, what's a way that they can respectfully honor or celebrate it? Or are there like community celebrations they could go and be a part of?
I think the most, the word you use, appropriation, of course, is exactly right. But I can, as a Mexican American, I can say that the experience of being a Mexican American is huge appropriation of Mexican culture and into this culture, so that it harmonizes with other realities of being an American. But I've seen lots of people in various different circumstances create ofrendas. I have a friend, Denise Chavez, who's a really great Chicana writer, and when she teaches, and she's taught at OU a few times, she puts one of those tables against the wall and has students bring in pictures of dead relatives and artifacts and so on. And the power that a public altar like that has is just amazing. When this happens in a classroom, people are constantly looking over at the table. They want to be close to it. They want to add more to it. There's a sort of bringing together of people in community in ways that I've seldom seen in any other context than recognizing the Day of the Dead and creating a classroom altar. So there's no strict formula for how you create an altar. It's a table that you designate, and you just put pictures and artifacts of the dead. You'd be surprised the power that it has over you, because the dead really never die in so many ways, because they live in us through memory. And so the recognitions of the dead, of the Day of the Dead, is bringing something out that's already there, that we're healthier when it's in front of us. So I think the altar would be the best way to honor that tradition.
Thank you. Let's move to Rabbi Mejia. What if someone from outside who doesn't identify as Jewish or outside the Jewish faith finds inspiration in Sukkot? What's a way that they could respectfully honor or celebrate it? Are there public celebrations they could join?
All of the Jewish communities have Sukkot events. It's a wonderful. We're supposed to be in the sukkah, to exist, to sleep, to eat in it. So it's a very social time. People like to have barbecues. and institutions have barbecues. They have um, lectures and learning in the sukkah. So even some of the synagogues, and of course this is a variant on security, will even have like sukkah time for people that maybe work around. Hey, I want to eat my lunch. I work near the synagogue. Maybe I can come and eat in the sukkah. People who have a strict review of tradition, for example, will not eat a meal that has bread during that week unless it's in a sukkah. It's a way of saying, I want my primary dwelling to be this temporary structure. But no, all the communities, and it's very welcoming. There is no it's just celebrating the harvest, and it's an 8-day holiday, so it's hard to miss. And everybody's welcome.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's move to Anil. What would be a way for someone to respectfully celebrate Diwali who may not be of Indian heritage?
Yeah, the very simple thing that any individual can do is light a little lamp anywhere at a prominent place in their house, light a candle or anything like that, and that's one way to celebrate. Because you're just the act of lighting a lamp itself will energize and bring that spirit and cheer of Diwali. But then the India Association of Oklahoma organizes a community program for Diwali every year. And it's a paid event, but it's open to everyone and involves a lavish Indian dinner. And they share this info, the info about their program around late September, early October, on their Facebook page as well as on their website. So I'm sharing the link of that website here, but those are a couple of ways you can get engaged. Yeah.
All right, and we will get that website up on the screen for folks in a second. And Deborah, what would be a way for someone to respectfully honor the Ramadan and the message behind Ramadan?
So I would say come to your local mosque. There are so many amazing people there that will welcome you in. I personally kind of bounce between 2 or 3 different mosques, but the Islamic Society of Greater Oklahoma City is open. Come in and introduce yourself. Someone will greet you at the door, inshallah, Lord willing. And see what we do. And it really is. And there are other ways, to coin a phrase from a friend of mine, Adam Sultani, if you don't have a Muslim friend, you have one now. We do a lot of things. And so because this faith and God is so merciful, there are people like myself that don't fast. If you have a health condition, there's some other little parameters. And so if you're not able to fast, a lot of us will get together and we'll make food for unhoused Oklahomans, for other people. And so you are spending that time together, worshiping, mindful of what you have, mindful of what other people don't have, mindful of what you could do without. And so, a lot of us will get together and we go feed the unhoused. We go out there, of course, some of us feed them all the time, but that is really, you are giving them a meal that you would be fasting from. And so, everybody loves a giant pot of Muslim spaghetti. Good marinara sauce with, fresh vegetables. So you can't beat that. But, go into the mosque and, introduce yourself and see, what our life is about and what we're doing. It's praying, it's worshiping, it is being together, it is spending time in, that spirit and really focusing. And so people are welcome.
That was such a lovely invitation, Deborah. Thank you for that. So I think we are going to start to wrap up. I'm going to invite everyone to kind of wrap up anything that I might not have asked about the holiday that you want to share, but I also want everyone to close with a food. Holidays are about food, or the lack of food, I guess, right? But what is a special food related to your holiday. Now, it may be like the stereotypical classic food, or may just be a family tradition, right? But what is a food with your holiday? And if you want to, you can introduce yourself again on the way out, invite people to go to whatever websites or organizations you would like. So we will start with Deborah.
Ah, here we go. So dates, I didn't know you could do so many things with dates. You can bake them with goat cheese. You can make smoothies. You can make lassis. And the beautiful thing about Islam is there are so many cultures and ethnicities and groups in there that you can take one thing and make it a million things. I used to work at one of the regional food bank food pantries. Food insecurity is my passion. Love to feed people. But anyways, we took a small bag of cornmeal and we gave it to different people of cultures, religions, faiths, colors, you name it. And we made sure everybody had some. And it was amazing how many different things came back from just one ingredient. And so dates are a big thing. Culturally, in our community, there are 50 million kinds of rice, jollof rice, and just million different things. But I'm going to say probably the one true theme: when we break our fast, we eat dates. In the morning, we eat dates. Dates are good for you. So dates.
Well, I'm going to admit I've never had a regular date like that.
Oh,
So I will now I
we
will
fix that.
vow to make that happen within the next month. Okay?
I'm going to follow up.
All right. Yes. All right. Let's move to Dr. Davis Undiando. What would be any parting words you have for us, and then what would be food you associate with Day of the Dead? Oh, you are still on mute. You're gonna need a. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say two food items. One is pan de muerto, death bread, and it's a wonderful, crusty, soft inside bread, and that people make for the Days of the Dead. And when it's just out of the oven and hot, and you put butter on it, maybe honey, it's absolutely wonderful. But the other food that you have to say for this time of year, because it's a Mexican and Mexican American Christmas dish, are tamales. Tamales are the oldest food in the Americas. We don't know where they were here before the Spanish, and they've always been here. We don't know how far back it goes. So Christmas tamales and the family getting together with a comal, a griddle, and warming up tortillas, and the mush that goes around the mix of the tamales, mixed tamales. That's an ancient Christmas tradition, and it's wonderful.
Yes, I have some Facebook friends that whenever they do the family tamale making sessions, post pictures all over Facebook, and it makes me jealous.
It's very messy.
Year. Yes. Let's move to Anil with our Hindu community of Oklahoma. What anything you want to say as parting words, and then what would be a food way of celebrating Diwali?
Yeah, so I want to invite everyone to also find any Indian or Hindu friend you may have, and just join them for Diwali. Just invite yourself, or let them know that, hey, I'd like to know your family traditions, because you're very right, Tim. Every family has their own traditions and their own unique ways of celebration. And then we just have so many rituals that some families pick some rituals or follow some rituals very closely. Some families follow other rituals closely. So the best way to learn is just to become a friend with any Hindu. You're welcome to my house as well, and we can celebrate jointly. Diwali is one festival where everybody wants to share, and everybody wants to care, and everybody wants to spread the light. And so everyone's really welcome. Nobody will be turned away on that day. And then one of the sweets that's particularly that I particularly like is called Shrikand. It's basically a hung yogurt. It's made from hung yogurt, or Greek yogurt, and mixed with sugar and some spices like saffron and cardamom. And then you just you can add whatever flavoring. Some people add rose essence. Some people add mangoes or mango puree. Some people add mixed fruit. Some people add dry fruits. So you can just make like different concoctions of the same dessert. That's my favorite. And my wife likes fried snacks that are more on the savory side. She doesn't have as much of a sweet tooth as I have, but she likes to make all the different fried snacks, a variety of them. And so if you do join us next year, because this year's Diwali is over, but next year, if you do join us, you can get an assortment of savory snacks, and then I can make a bowl of Srikhand for you.
I appreciate the savory and sweet, although I am definitely a fan of the sweet-based holidays more than the savory-based ones. And so I wanted to wrap up with Rabbi Juan Meha from Emmanuel Synagogue, and Harbah Festival, all of the foods, right? But are there any special?
But here's the thing: you would be surprised. Oh, a synagogue! Like, what's a food for Sukkot? And in my synagogue, the food for Sukkot is pupusas, which are Salvadorian, and that is like I was thinking a lot. I was thinking a lot of what Deborah was saying. The beauty of small mosques and small temples and small immigrant communities in Oklahoma is that we're so new that every little place it's not homogenous.
Mm-hmm.
You have a large number of people coming from all of these micro Jewish worlds, right? And same thing with Muslim and Hindu worlds. People are coming from all parts of the subcontinent. We are blessed also with many converts, so that brings everything up a notch in the sense that you're having cultural cross-pollination in very small spaces, and everyone is enriched. So yes, it's not absurd that a synagogue in Oklahoma would decide, you know what, those flat Salvadorian I have to call them arepas because I'm Colombian, but like I've been told they're not arepas. Like this will start a fight, so we want to keep it civil. So I will call them what the people who make them like what they call them. I will honor their name.
Thank you. That was such a beautiful note to kind of wrap up on. Not just the flatbread part, but the idea, the small communities and the cross-pollination that happens here in Oklahoma with our small immigrant communities connecting with each other. I think it's beautiful. I think that is one of the beautiful things about Oklahoma City and doing interfaith work in Oklahoma City as well. So I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us one more time. We have Rabbi Juan Meha from Emmanuel Synagogue. We have Deborah Bonita from the Oklahoma Muslim Prison Support in HDFI, and Neil Kathari, who's an educator in the Hindu community of Oklahoma, and Dr. R.C. Davis Undiano, who is professor of Latinx Studies at OU and the director of World Literature Today. And behind the scenes, a big thanks to Kat, who is our tech director behind the scenes. My name is Tim Atkins from First Unitarian. Thank you all for joining the Oklahoma Faith Network panel on diverse holiday celebrations. Happy holidays, no matter which holiday you choose to celebrate.
Happy holidays. Thanks, everyone.